Welcome to the Talkback of Union County. I am Jeremy Lentz, Executive Director of the Teaneck International Film Festival, and I have the great pleasure to introduce Kashinda Marche, who was the featured person in our documentary tonight. She is a community advocate, an author, and a public speaker. Kashinda, welcome.
Thank you
We're
so
happy to
much.
have you here. I want to
Thank
get
you.
right into it. We just completed the talkback of our feature documentary called Matter of Mind, which is a film on Parkinson's. And we learned about the importance of support groups for both medical and mental health needs for the Parkinson's community. Mental health is often something that's very overlooked, and it parallels to communities that are living with HIV. So, Kashinda, if you could tell me how your organization, Kreative on Purpose, helps people and who does it help?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Jeremy. Creative on Purpose, our mission there is to provide creative mental wellness tools to women and girls. We do that in a variety of ways, workshops and um, affirmation practices. We have workbooks that I've personally written. And so, we believe that chronic illness, just in general, chronic illness, yes, it does affect us physically, but definitely also mentally. And that's where the creation of Creative on Purpose came in at, just to be able to lend additional resources, for those that are living through tough times, whether that be chronic illness or just, these devastating life situations that we sometimes find ourselves in. And that's pretty much who we serve, women and girls in difficult spaces in their life, and we offer creative mental wellness tools to help them on their journey.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me when we were speaking and that your website talks about is creativity is the foundation and pathway to mental wellness. And that's really, I think, a big focus of what your nonprofit does. Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. We believe that, creativity allows us to kind of be our authentic selves, if you will. And when you're dealing with life-changing events, we sometimes react to what is actually what that situation is, and we sometimes forget, who we really are, which are warriors.
Mhm.
We conquer obstacles almost every day, and so we have to be able to remind ourselves, of these things in order to help propel us forward.
Yeah. And it's through that strength and the love and support that is really something that helps people that are struggling with various diseases. And we just saw that in the last film too, because the subjects of the documentary, one of them, Peter, was a political cartoonist. And, the work that he did with his art form really helped to, give him that drive. And the other woman was a
Yes.
boxer, female boxer, and we saw the importance, and they even talked about it in the talkback of their mental well-being, exercise, health, wellness, to support that. I'd like to get into some of the specifics with what's going on with HIV, particularly now in this country since the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. There are major threats that are being proposed across this country in state legislatures that can potentially have a grave impact on people living with HIV and those who are at high risk for contracting the virus. Things like access to care, treatment, and prevention are critical components to fighting the disease and also working to end shame and stigma, which is so important to helping to end this battle. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. You raise a really good, point. Right now in our country, and even for a long time, right? we'll just, you know, just keep it 100 if we could. For a
Hmm.
very long time, um, uh, human rights have been threatened, right? And so when you get into the specifics of the HIV community, and those at risk, which are those in the most vulnerable parts of our community, um, which we know HIV does not discriminate. So everyone is on the chopping block, if you will, when it
Correct.
comes to this horrific disease. But in terms of different legislatures and you mentioning access to care, that is one of the top threats. We already struggle with that from the begin with. And so when you have certain policies and certain legislatures and bills and things being overturned or being created contrary to what it is that we should be creating, we heighten the travesty of trying to navigate, with chronic illnesses. And HIV still being very highly stigmatized, uh, we have a lot more work to do, right? We
Correct.
have a lot more work to do. And so creative on purpose being just an additional tool, right? We want to have as many tools in our toolkit to help us on our journey to mental well-being and to, if you will, additional tools for you. But what it also allows is for you to create the life that you want to lead, right? So in contrast to everything that society is kind of putting us through, you still ultimately have an option of creating the life you want for yourself. And yes, it takes a lot of support for that. Yes, it takes a ton of tools for that. But it can be done. And that's what we like to see. We like to see people, kind of live the best that they can with what it is that they're dealing with.
Right. And I think it's important, education is such a big part of it to inform other people so they can be advocates for us. Because people think,
Yes.
the overturning the Dobbs decision and the overturning of Roe v. Wade just impacts, maternal health and access to contraception, which actually falls under PrEP, which a lot of people are unaware. PrEP is now a drug that's out there that people who are HIV negative but at high risk can take that in order to not contract HIV. And that's currently covered it's free for people under health policies. And if they don't have health insurance, pharmaceutical companies will make it accessible to people who can't access this. And it's such a big part in combating the disease. These proposed threats would potentially take that away and make it illegal for that drug to be accessible to people or make it to a point where people could not afford it. So, we have to be very aware of how we're going to combat, because if we are going to win the fight against the disease, we have to be able to educate the most marginalized communities and get in there and provide access to care, which is so critical. And that brings me to my next question, where we're in an election year, and it's so important for us to elect elected officials who are going to advocate for our health and mental well-being and understand the importance in that. And hopefully we can find a cure in our lifetime. But I think if you could talk about your diagnosis in 95 to where we are today in 2024, a lot has changed in a positive way. And if you could speak about, where we've come and, the hope for where we can possibly go.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I was diagnosed in 1995, and at that time we were, and I say we, the world basically, we were still new to the illness, and so the the pictures that were painted for us at that time, they were very grim, which posed a lot of fear in people, right? Which silenced people. And so what you had was this illness that was like the last thing anybody wanted to hear. And the
Yeah.
last
If
thing,
you were diagnosed with HIV, it was
yeah,
effectively a death sentence.
yeah, absolutely, and I mean fast,
And you would
it was
lose your
just quick.
job if people found out. You wouldn't
That's
have
right.
access. So people couldn't even disclose their
That's
status.
right. That's right. We've come a long way. HIV, in some parts of today is still criminalized, but not nearly as much or as highly as it was once upon a time, which also posed fear into people. Which also, when we have fear and we have that silence, that's where stigma gets to kind of grow and manifest. And so, we end up in a place where nobody wants to talk about it, but we need to talk about it. It lessens the educational factor, just the awareness of it. And so where we are today it's a beautiful thing as someone I'm nearly 30 years in surviving, this ordeal. And from where we were to where we are now, like, I mean, I just witnessed like one a very close friend of mine's, um, she just had a baby, and it's like she's positive, she just had a baby. And it was a beautiful thing to see because that was one of the things that, we felt like we couldn't do
Couldn't
way
do.
back when,
Yeah,
females, you get pregnant, you have a kid, more than likely that child will be positive. Where today,
that's not the
with
case.
the advances, yeah, that we have going on, if you're undetectable, the baby can be born negative, if you're taking certain medications, give the baby medications right after birth, things can be okay. It's just we've definitely come a long way, but it's not to say that we
We still have a long way
still
to go.
have we still have a long way to go, but it's
Yeah.
conversations like this that help to kind of
And I
check
want to
that
touch
stigma.
upon 2 points,
Hmm.
Kashanda, before we wrap up, just to
Hmm.
clarify for our audience who may not know. U equals U is a status. That means undetectable equals untransmittable. And because of the life-saving medications that are out there, it makes the viral load so low that if you are positive and you are undetectable, that means that you cannot transmit the virus. And
Yes.
that is also part of the education. And as you said, changing these archaic laws, which means decriminalizing HIV in states where, people could potentially still go to jail in some states for not disclosing their status. That adds to all the shame and stigma of people not wanting to disclose their status, get tested, and know their status. So these are
Yes.
things that, if we want to give a takeaway to our community that's watching out here, we need you to be advocates and allies for us because mental health and shame and stigma, as we saw with Parkinson's, as we see with HIV, impacts everybody. And people need to be aware of what is going on because we are all part of this one large umbrella. So I thank you so much, Kashanda, for being an advocate, an activist, and a speaker, for sharing your story and doing the work that you are doing here in New Jersey. It is incredible and important work, and you are inspiring and spreading that strength, light, and love that you talk about. And I
Thank you.
encourage people to check out Kreative on Purpose. And thank you so, so much for joining us
Yeah.
tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor.